We had, their ugly heads again recently, last year with the NSAS protest issue. We had a whole of Nigerians, non-Nigerians went out, they protested against the system and all of that. But again, we saw the way many of them were treated, humiliated, arrested, and all of that. Bringing to question, again, the question of human rights abuse in Nigeria. But beyond all of that, should we say that Nigeria has had it fairly good in terms of human rights issues since independence 1960?
Well, let's take it one by one. If we talk about the impact of human rights development as we have in the 60s to what we have in the 70s and 80s, there have been significant progress in terms of formulation of laws, in terms of recognitions of rights, in terms of access to court. Even there's a special procedure for the enforcement of fundamental human rights that didn't follow the normal court process, that a person whose right has been violated can easily approach the court. And this time around, it's not only restricted to one court, both High Court and the Federal High Court. In terms of law, yes, there is significant progress in the area of legal development to enhance the protection of or enthronement of fundamental human rights protection in Nigeria. But when we come to issues of implementations of law, that is a different ballgame. And you could know that when we talk about violations of human rights, we are looking at it from the perspective of government, where the rights of citizens are trampled upon. How do government respond to genuine complaints? And in most cases, this could be excessive. In most cases, it could even be more than the ordinary, as we find in that case of NSAS. And so we have to bifurcate the issue of law and the implementations of the law in one hand. If you are talking about the bundle of laws to protect human rights or to enhance, we have that one in place. The laws that are there is the implementation of the law itself that we seems to have a bit of challenges. And if you look at it even from the judicial interpretations of human rights, you will also find out that the judiciary has been very generous. Gone are the days that they don't even award damages. In deserving cases, they award heavy penalties against the violators of, and even in the implementations of the damages being awarded by the court. But you see, when we assess human rights from the perspective of, let's break it, from independence, in the colonial days, the aggressors then were the colonial masters fighting us against independence. When we got independence, it's the government against the people. It wasn't during the military regime where people were just arrested anyhow. Any criticism of government is seen as challenging them, and they can make any arrest. Sometimes they lock people there. It wasn't during the Abacha regime. But with the enthronement of constitutional democracy, we tend to have a little bit of leeway, except some of the recent happenings that tends to trample on the protection of fundamental human rights. There are so many of them rearing its ugly heads in recent times. We have the NSAS, which is not very far. The way the protesters were handled wasn't that. Initially, government was a little bit, allowed them to exercise their right of speech, their right of protest, but it turns ugly towards the end. And I'm sure the government must have learned its lesson from that episode. But from what we are also seeing now, which is the most current one, the herdsmen issue, which also is also human rights issues, also security issues as well. Because if you take a look at it, somebody who owns land and his land is being destroyed, no compensation for the destruction of his crops, no compensation for the destruction of his farm, and the issues is not being properly articulated by government to find a lasting solution to it. There's no way the fundamental human rights of people will not be. And going further, apart from the insecurity issues that comes into it, there will be loss of life. So many people, if we take what happened in Jos, for example, in those days when the Fulani Hausa people had their trouble, a lot of people lost their lives there, and many breadwinners died. Who is providing for them in a country where our social security system is not even in place? You find out that a lot of families will be left without anybody to take care of them, and it's not too good for the human rights record of this country.
Now, you have raised a number of issues. One of them is damages, but before we come to the damages that oftentimes are awarded when someone's rights has been infringed upon, let us look at awareness. How would you actually, how would you assess the level of awareness of Nigerians in terms of their rights? From what you have observed, do you think Nigerians are now aware of their rights? I mean, though there is one thing to be aware and there is another thing to be able to stand up for that right when it is violated. But do you think we are getting more aware of our...
Yeah, there is increasing level of awareness, particularly from the elite perspective. When we talk about awareness, most of the people who are much aware of their rights are usually elites, who, when trampled upon, they can easily approach the court. But for the downtrodden people of the society, I cannot really say that they're 100% aware of their rights. And that's also the question of the function of government and the role of the media. The level of awareness and education as well as propagation of human rights is to be done not only by putting it in the Constitution. We must have a way of getting this thing known to the ordinary citizens, that okay, if this is done, like there was a time when people would go to police stations and police would be asking you for money for bail. When there is mass media propagation of the fact that bail is free, everybody knows that right. The same thing should go for fundamental human rights. There should be level of education at various languages, bringing it down to various languages, communities, for them to be aware of their rights, and also the way to ventilate those rights when they are being infringed upon. It calls for continuous education and trainings and collaborations, which involves the mass media.
Now, you have raised a very, very crucial point as well. Bail is free. Since I was very, very small, I have been hearing bail is free, but up till now,
it's not free.
It is not free, as a matter of fact.
In practice.
In practice. At what point, really? At what point can we say, or is there a kind of offense that the police will arrest one for, and then the person would actually be released free, and then there are other offenses that once you're arrested for it, you have to pay something?
No, once an offense is a bailable offense,
okay,
bail is supposed to be free. Not if it's, you see, we all know what is happening. You see, it takes two people to give bribe. If you want to bribe a police officer, you must be ready to give, and the receiver must be ready to take. If you are not willing to give, and the receiver is insisting, definitely, if you stick to your gun, you will not give. We see people don't give bribe and they still get things done. It could be slow. It is, one vital attitude about Nigeria is that we always want to get everything done in a hurry. And so when somebody names the price, they say name your price, and then you move on. That's the biggest problem. But if you insist on your right, if you go to a police station now, it's not as bad as it was before. I could tell you that, because there are also internal checks and balances within the system. If you approach a junior officer and it's being hard upon you, you could speak to the superior officer who is well trained, who has received formal training, and who will not want to be seen to be encouraging corruption within the police system. I think I really don't want to say that it is still as bad as it was in those days when some of us started practice.
Now, still talking about the police, I remember there was a time I had issues with my account, and then in order to, I went to report to the police, and the police told me that for you to recover what has been taken from the account and then to arrest those people, you have to pay certain amount of money. And then I calculated what they have asked me to bring and then what was in the account. I told myself that it's going to be a penny wise, pound foolish for me to, give them the money to go and chase the criminal for me. Now, quite a number of persons have also complained of such. Sometimes they will say, oh, you have to fuel our car to... Is it really within the purview of the law?
No. I can tell you point blank that is not within the purview of the law. And the more, when you experience such things, you ought to have made it, even make a report, official report, even to the very senior officers there. I tell you as a fact, there's this saying that evil will triumph when good men keep silent. When we continue to make continuous noise about the attitude of police officers in terms of treatments of complaints, there will be improvement. But when we keep silent about it, there is no way anybody will know. Check the issue of NSAS. The issue of SARS, the treatment of Nigerians in the hands of the police have been ongoing. But when it got to a top, people cannot accept it. The youth said they cannot accept it. There was hoops and cry.
Can we say the government did not know that such things were happening, or they just paid deaf ears? I mean, probably because they were not affected directly. That was why they were not really concerned and doing anything about it.
No, you see, when you talk about government, who is the government? The police is part of the executive arms of the government. Who are you going to? When you say government, we also too, we are part of government one way or the other. We have to follow an administrative process by which you make complaint known to the higher authorities. These are some of the things that are needed to put in, even legally. How do we, when you have a complaint against an institution, what is the process that you need to comply with in order for that process to receive attention? These are some of the things that are needed to put in place. That government, how will let's take for example, IG in Abuja knows that somebody in Abeokuta demanded for bribe, and because he demanded for bribe, that action was not taken. There's no way we know unless you report, unless there's a reporting system. And if it is so rampant, it is also the responsibility of the press too, to make an issue out of it. Most of the time, you will find out that most complaints that people hear about and they comment about emanated from the report from the press, the fourth realm of government. And that is why the right of freedom of speech is highly protected in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. When you see evil, report evil. And once you report evil, you get a lot of followers that will drum it up. Government can't see everything. If you start saying that, oh, government, no. We are also part of government. We are also part of government. If you see something that is, for example, if you look at the Police Act, the former Police Act, under Section 4, a legal practitioner has right to arrest if a crime is being committed. How many legal practitioners are arrested? Does he have the wherewithal to arrest? But it's there. And most of the laws that are coming up now give some citizens the right to speak up. In some cases, the right to ventilate some of those grievances in court, where government fails to take actions. There are not even the interpretations of laws are aiding public interest litigation, such that we can't leave everything totally to government. Sometimes certain things we on our own too needed to do more. Government will not organize rally for you to say that the police are against us. They won't do that. It's also for us too. But we must do it within the confines of the law.
Yes. Now let us look at torture. It's also something that is a violation of one's rights, yes, and then very also predominant in this part of the world. Torture in different in cells, police cells, military cells, and the rest of them. And then they will tell you that, yes, it is because they are trying to get information from the suspect. That is why they are subjecting that person to torture. Now, is that allowed?
No, within the Constitution, it's not allowed. And even if a confessional statement is obtained through torture or force or duress, There is also the provision in the Criminal Procedure Act that provides for what we call trial within trial, where the judge will conduct a trial to determine, conduct investigation to determine whether that confessional statement was voluntarily given or was involuntarily given. The new CPA Act, the new Administration of Justice Act of 2011, 2015, I can't remember the year, has also provided for the procedure for obtaining statements. Once you don't follow the procedure, the written statement will not be admitted in evidence. And that will be all. In fact, as a matter of fact, I know there's a provision there that says that you can also obtain confessional statement in the presence of the legal practitioner. All these things have been taken into place to take into consideration the who's and cry of the human rights activists in the past few years on the issue of torture of suspects in extracting confessional statement for possible conviction. I think there is improvement in that. You see, like I said, there is the law there. The question is, do they follow it? And that is why it also requires the police system, the police as an organization, to continue to engage its members in continuous training on this issue. Continuous training, particularly those officers that are in charge of extracting information from students and from suspects. Do not forget that while one is not supporting the issue of torture, there are some hardened criminals who, for one reason or the other, they will not confess. But that does not say they should use torture together. That is the duty of the prosecution, to ensure that it gets its evidence in place before taking the accused to court. Torture is not allowed by the Constitution, neither is it encouraged by the Administration of Justice Act of Nigeria.
Okay, now there's this common thing in the media. You know, television stations in Nigeria would do it, radio stations, newspapers. The police will call you after making some arrests to come cover the arrest they've made. And at that point, those they have arrested are still suspects, yet they are made to speak in front of cameras, speak to midgets, their pictures are taken and all of that. Is that not violation of their rights? Because at that point in time, they are still suspects.
Well, we have to look at it. The law is that a person is presumed innocent until he is proved guilty in court. And therefore, if the parade suspects are not criminals, because we have to distinguish between a suspect being arrested for committing a crime as well as somebody who has been convicted, an accused person who has been duly convicted by the court for the offense committed. At that point in time, I don't think the suspect is expected to self-incriminate himself. The Constitution also protects the right against self-incrimination. You are not supposed to say anything that will incriminate you. So, if they are talking on their own, there is no duress, and they are the one confessing the sin, the offense that they have committed, there's nothing very bad about that. We have not said that you are the one who asked them to confess. If this is coming from their mouth, not out of torture, if they are arrested and they are volunteering information as to how they committed the offense, where the offense was committed, I can assure you that before the police will even parade them to you, they must have extracted some information from them. And so whatever they are coming there to say may not be different from whatever they must have written down in the complaint sheet that they already given to the police. So I do not see a very clear violation of their right if they are not being referred to as criminal in the real sense of it. I mean, they are suspect. The language is that they are still suspect until it's proved otherwise. But if on their own they volunteer information for the press or for the general public, good.
Okay, with respect to some specific questions Dominic asked you, and that has to do with awareness of people, about provisions of the law, against violation of fundamental human rights. We also do know that we have a whole lot of police posts, police stations hidden at different corners where a lot of atrocities take place that go unnoticed, that go unreported. Now, what is the way out in that kind of situation? Particularly in a country that does not have a database for, we're not as sophisticated as advanced countries of the world.
Yeah, you see, if there are illegal police stations or illegal police posts, once it is discovered, I think the proper thing is to report to the highest.
I'm not talking about legal ones.
Illegal, I'm talking about illegal police stations.
No, legal police stations, legal ones.
Legal ones.
Yeah, they are hidden in some, we have some places that are not, that the media may not actually know such things are really going on there. And people that are living close to those stations, people that are really involved in those situations are, some of them are extremely illiterate to the extent that they are scared of coming out to talk about it.
You see, let me say this very well. When I talk about awareness campaign, media campaign in various languages, we have to bring the knowledge of human rights to the bottom, not necessarily the top. Because we must recognize the fact that majority of our population are illiterate. And so there's a way we must communicate to them their rights. And the best way to do that is to do mass education in their language, in the local language that they can recognize, and tell them the grievance redress process in their own local language. That is when the issue of human rights will trickle down. And when somebody sees evil being perpetrated or heard that evil is being perpetrated, he knows where to go. For example, if a government takes this on its own, or an organization takes this on its own to propagate the knowledge of human rights, of course, it will also provide for, well, in case you need help, please contact this person, this phone number. This is part of the mass literacy campaign on human rights. We need to do that in this part of the world for people to. We did that sometimes on environment, when there was environmental degradation. We have to trickle it down to the language that the people on the street will understand. The same thing we need to do in human rights. And again, the teaching of human rights should also begin from primary school. Those who cancel civic education, they didn't do.
I think it's back now.
Well, once it is back now,
I think it's back.
They should integrate human rights into primary school syllabus. From primary school, let people be aware of their rights. What is human in the language, in the simplest form that they can understand that we have right. You see, it's like indoctrination. You indoctrinate them when they were small, up to the time they will understand. When people say, if you say an American, they will say the only country in the world is America, any other person. It begins from primary school. It begins from you. It's indoctrination. You indoctrinate them about certain values, core values of the nation.
Now, you talked about damages earlier on, and then we have seen situations where probably an institution of government was asked to pay damages to an individual whose right was violated by that institution of government, and that institution failed or refused to pay these damages even after so many years. Recently, I think it was the Nigerian police that was called, whose attention was called to that it has some damages that should be paid to some individuals running into millions. How do we ensure, because justice may not be said to have been served if these damages are not being paid?
But there are procedures in our laws, particularly Sheriff and Civil Process Acts, that provides for the enforcement of judgment in court. When a judgment in court is granted, lawyers knows what to do. There are too many procedures you can do. You can attach the proceeds of the proceed in the bank. You can garnish the account of Nigerian police. You can seize their assets. Once you follow the procedure, the lawyers knows what to do. And somebody who's doing a human rights work, who is a human rights lawyer, is fearless. Generally, they are fearless. And so they know the procedure to ventilate the grievance and the procedure also to seek to collect the damages. Government account can be attached once you follow the procedure. Government assets can be seized once there. In civil cases, apart from human rights, don't they pay damages to other people? They do. It's the same process. Government property can be attached. The rules are there. Just follow the process. But if the lawyer or the person who is supposed to implement is not ready to do that, or then that's a different ballgame. But it is not true to say that because police is involved, they can't. They do pay damages. They do come to court to defend cases on human rights. They know very well the obligations on them to pay the damages, and they know fully well that once damages is awarded against them, the lawyer can pursue it to recover the money on behalf of their clients. So,
what about wrong perception of what is fundamental to you as right? Because I mean, you were almost you actually mentioned it a bit, the raving issue. And that is the issue of herdsmen versus communities, farmers, and all of that. The Fulanis that use the animals to graze, they also have this belief that it is their fundamental human rights too to also take the animals around and graze. Is that also part of what we're talking about?
You see, these herdsmen right to graze, and also there's legal political question. It has both legal and political connotation. Once something is political, you leave that to the politicians to handle. But once it is within the comfort, what does the law provide? You see, if you look at the law very clearly, the so-called the Land Use Act, the ownership of land in the territory of the state is vested in the state governor. Land belongs to, it's a local affair. Land matter, if you check the constitution, land matter is a local matter. It's the governor of the state that have overriding power over the management, control, and administration of land in the state. So there is no way you can say somebody you can't claim Ogun State person cannot walk to Lagos State and say because he's a Nigerian, he's going to take the land of somebody in Lagos State. That's trespass. If you are talking about grazing, is grazing private property? It's not public property. If federal government requires land in the territory of the state, the federal government still has to pass through the state governor to request for land. They must pay compensation to the owners of the land. They must follow the procedure for revocation of interest in land. So if government requires even land for developmental purposes, federal government, it passes through the state government.
So for the grazers, their practice is one right taken too far or completely a misconception of right?
The right that is protected under the 1999 constitutions are those that are enshrined in chapter 2 chapter 4 of the 1999 constitution, which is all the rights to life, right, and the one that is also protected more, check section 44, is the right to property, right to own property and not to be compulsorily acquired unless you follow the due process of the law. So who is acquiring the land? Is it government that is acquiring the private land for grazers, or the grazers forcefully taking over lands of another person? When you take a look at that, that's a clear case of civil violation of rights with security implication. That is a discussion for another day. But within the confines of right to own land, right to acquire property, right to protect land, the constitution is very clear. In fact, after life, the only thing that the law protects more is property.
Now, still talking about land, there is the issue of Omonile. I'm sure you must have heard of it.
Yes.
What they call them? Land grabbers.
Land grabbers.
That's criminal.
That's criminal.
It's criminal. Why do you grab another person's land?
No, not even grabbing this time around. Yes, yeah, there are quite some people who grab. And then there are also some who will say, before you do anything, you have to pay us. An artist was actually having a video shoot recently, and then the Oniles came around
Sense
and
of
said,
entitlement.
you have to pay us. And then they even gave them money, and then they were saying, I mean, this is not enough.
You know, there is difference between law and practice. Our forefathers in those days, when they sell land to you, there's this issue that if you want to do development, to give them. Those are customary things, but shouldn't be carried too far. If you don't want to pay, there's no legal right for them to demand. Once they have sold land to you, it's absolutely so. But you and I know that you are going to stay in that community. Let's be pragmatic. And there's the need. They are the people who sold land to you. But the demand must be reasonable. But it's not legal. Quite frankly, it's not legal. It's not as if that they have the legal right to demand for it. And you don't have any legal obligation to give to them. But you see, when we talk law, we also have to come back to practicality of life. If the money is reasonable, some people pay. Some will not pay. I remember when I wanted to do something like that, they came. I was forceful, but I said, no, I won't give you money. Where are you going to get this kind of money from? And one guy called me and said, look, come. They are going to stay with this people. Come down, let's negotiate this one. Once you came to an acceptable
Exactly.
it doesn't hurt me.
Okay, Prof, we'll close this interview now, but finally, we would like to ask you, will you say then that human rights issues in Nigeria are fairly, better than what we see in other parts of Africa and in the world, and probably there have been vast improvement too?
With the recent happenings in recent years, what we are witnessing is in recent years, in the last 2 years, I think we are going backward. Well, I can't say that one without equivocation. We are going backward. It was not, if you look at the fight for human rights and enthronement of democracy against the military, as that took us to the way we are today, that we're enjoying democracy, freedom to talk, freedom to do everything. If by government action or inactions, some of these rights are being taken away. I heard sometimes the Minister of Information is saying that he's going to censor some social medias. That's infringement. We tend to see a little bit of government trying to intervene in the human rights. And if we don't talk, if we don't act, before we know it, most of those rights that we enjoy will be trampled upon, and it will be away, and we'll just come back to totalitarianism. But compared to other parts of the world, if we talked about Europe or America, you know that very well the human rights system there is well entrenched because of the liberal movement and every other thing. We cannot, vis-a-vis the other parts of the world, we can't be, the western parts of the world, we are still behind. But in terms of Africa, well, we're okay.
The panel of inquiry that was set up after the NSAS, are you optimistic that, what's your level of optimism that something can come out of something meaningful and tangible?
Well, it's good to have hope. It's very good to have hope that good things will come out. But with the way things are going, I don't know what is happening in that tribunal now, how much evidence they are gathering, and how many witnesses were coming there to do. It's too premature at this level to make an assessment. All what we read now is about what the newspapers are reporting, or also not only reporting, also projecting. So it will be, for somebody who is a bit learned, it's not nice for us to just judge, because we are not at the scene of it. But I want to assume that they will come up with far-reaching recommendations that will assist government, that some of those things that led to NSAS and the other ugly incidents that followed therefrom will not repeat itself.
We must thank you so much for coming on this program this morning. Professor of Law from UNILAG, Professor DAYO AMOKAYE, thank you so much for your thoughts on today's program on this topic, human rights issues in Nigeria's history of development. Well, thank you so much for coming, Prof.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you. Okay, we'll take this break. When we return, we have two other guests who will be talking about the headsmen communities issue in Ondo and Oyo State. That will be our next topic on the program, Newdawn. Stay with us.